If you've been wondering how to help your child become college and career ready when it comes to writing, maybe you would love to actually talk to a college professor. Well, today's episode is for you. My name is Alicia Brown, and I am the host of the Write with Mrs. Brown podcast. I also am the owner of writewithmrsbrown.com, where I help parents turn their 3rd through 12th grade students into exceptional writers. And on the episode today, I am talking to Dr. Melissa Cancel, and she is going to give you her perspective as a 30-year professor on things you can do to make sure that your child is college and career ready. This is a series called Why Writing Matters, and let me tell you what you are in store for in this episode. She's going to discuss how writing plays a role in her field, the current state of writing skills among students today, and she will share 3 to 5 writing proficiencies your middle school and high school students should develop to be college and career ready. So grab that tea, that coffee, or beverage of choice, and let's dive into the conversation. Welcome, everyone. Hi, I am Mrs. Brown, and welcome to the Write with Mrs. Brown podcast. I help homeschooling families and just parents in general who have students in elementary, middle, and high school. I help transform your kids into exceptional writers. And today I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Dr. Melissa Cancel. With a PhD in communication and 30 years of college teaching experience, Melissa is passionate about the vital role communication plays in both our professional and personal lives. Melissa has been married for 18 years, has 6 kids, 5 grands, and a grand cat named Loki, and a grand turtle named Bob. So we are so blessed to have her here. She is a very busy person, clearly. She recently founded the Communication Doc to help committed married couples improve communication, reduce conflict, and develop the kind of fulfilling marriages they've always dreamed of, but never consistently achieved. Welcome, Dr. Melissa Cancel. I'm so glad to have you here on my show today. How are you?
I'm doing very well. And how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you so much. So, this particular series is called Why Writing Matters. Again, as I was sharing with my audience and with you earlier, I work with parents and support them as they are hoping to ensure that their children are exceptional writers and that they're ready, college and career ready when it comes to writing. I'm gonna have to bring you back on the show for the second part of what you do, because that's a whole other episode and very important for sure. So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the work that you do. But in our conversation today, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your work and how writing plays a role in your field.
Okay, great. Well, personally, and getting to the point where I am, of course, I have an undergraduate degree, a master's, and a PhD in communication. And oh boy, especially in those graduate programs, you pretty much do nothing but writing and reading. College, you will write a lot, but you'll have tests and other things. But once you get beyond that point, if you decide you need an advanced degree, you better have really good writing skills. I think probably every class I took, I had to write a minimum of 30 to 50 pages. And then, of course, I had to write my final projects for both my master's and my PhD. And my dissertation, I think, was probably 250 pages. So lots and lots of writing, and there's no way I could have possibly accomplished those degrees without my writing skills. And what was interesting is when I was in high school, I never wanted to be a college professor. That was not something I was considering. And even going through college, I really wanted to do counseling. And so I never intended needing those advanced degrees, but then my plans changed. And so I was so happy and blessed that I had focused on writing so that when my idea changed, I was able to still continue and get those future degrees and have the skills that I needed to be able to do that successfully. And then in the 30 years I've taught, of course, I've taught all kinds of communication courses and required papers and speech outlines and such. And so my ability to help my students improve their communication. While I don't teach them writing, I do teach them how to communicate, and the two are integrally connected, right? You don't find people usually who are really good speakers and horrible writers, or really good writers and horrible speakers. Your command of the language tends to apply to both.
I'm glad that you brought up the issue of your plans changing, because some students think, oh well, I don't want to be a writer, or I don't want to be an XYZ. I'm not going to need writing as much. And so I'm glad that you shared, just even in your own journey, that your plans changed, and you being an excellent writer really did come in handy with the pivot that you made academically. So thank you for sharing that. And yes, I agree. I think that's a really important point that you brought up, that communication, they go hand in hand. Writing and speaking are very connected. I actually teach a public speaking course for 6th through 12th graders, and we always start by writing our speech before we speak. And so that is so very important. Thank you for bringing that up. So my question for you is, from your perspective, what do you see as the current state of writing skills among students today? And are there any trends that concern or excite you?
Um, if I can be really blunt, I would say that in general, the writing I'm seeing is pretty atrocious. Um, and I don't use that word lightly. I mean, I've been teaching for 30 years, and over those 30 years, I have seen the writing skill decrease dramatically.
Hmm.
I think there's many factors. I think there's less of an emphasis on writing in education, in all the way up through high school. I think there's less of an emphasis on writing than there used to be. I think there's less of an emphasis on teaching grammar, but also because of the technology we have available, we have become very sloppy in our communication. So you think about people sending text messages. A lot of times you don't put in punctuation, you don't put in capitalization, you don't speak correctly. And I understand you don't need to do that when you're texting, but I will see submissions where, especially, for example, a discussion post, where it's written like a text message. It's supposed to be a paragraph. There are 4 or 5 sentences in it, I think, but there's no capitalized letters, there's no punctuation. It's very much this, let me just rattle off my thoughts. And there are times for that, but the time for that is not when you're supposed to be writing for something academic in your college career. And so I really think that this is an area that parents need to make sure their kids are well prepared, because the college professors they have, their English teachers, of course, are going to work with them, but the rest of us, we don't have time to teach our students how to write. That's
Mm.
not my job as a communication professor. I teach them about public speaking, how to communicate in relationships, to a certain extent, maybe even mass communication, but writing is not my field. And so I can't take all of my time trying to correct grammar and punctuation and spelling, but I see that students are not doing that, even though they have tools available to them in Word for spell and grammar check. Most of the students don't use it. And as a result, they don't communicate well, and I count off. I take off points for poor grammar, poor spelling. So they could communicate their thoughts well necessarily, but they're still going to lose points because they're not communicating it clearly in the correct fashion.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is a interesting perspective. I didn't grow up, my generation did not grow up with, texting and all of the technology. And so yeah, there is that whole, like, there's no punctuation in texting. I've seen many parents mention the how communication is happening in texting, and how that is translated over to emails or other modes of communication. And that's not where we want to transfer those kinds of ways to communicate. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So I have two questions I'd like to ask you. So how has strong writing ability impacted your career? You kind of talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but how have you seen like a strong writing ability impact your career or the careers of others in your actual field?
Well, especially in the field of communication, strong writing is essential. But I would say that in any field, if you want to proceed beyond the high school level, you have to have strong writing skills or you are going to struggle with everything you do. Possibly math classes, you don't have to write, but every other class that you take, you're going to have to write papers, you're going to have to write responses, you're going to have to write discussion posts. And so that writing is essential. So for me, having good writing skills made all of my academic career much easier. Not that it was necessarily easy, but it was much easier for me to be able to do the work I needed to do the research, to put my thoughts into coherent statements, and to have correct punctuation and grammar so that I didn't have to rely on other people to help me. Yes, I use spelling grammar check, but I didn't have to try to find a writing tutor to check my work and edit it and send it back to me, and then me have to make edits again and so on. I was able to do all of that myself because I was a strong writer. And so when you think about the time it saves, the effort it saves, and then also you're able to accomplish more. You can go farther in your career when you have good writing.
Thank you for sharing that. I'd love for you to share a couple of things. As I was listening to you, as a parent, I'm thinking, okay, what is it then that I can do to make sure my child is like Dr. Cancel, independent? When we have, particularly my parents who have littles, and we're kind of side by side, shoulder to shoulder with our students and developing those skills. And our goal long term is that they are prepared, that they are able on their own to be independent writers who are competent and confident writers. Can you share 3 to 5 writing proficiencies middle school and high school students should develop to be college and career ready? And I'm just curious about your own personal experience. How were you able to be so prepared, and then what are some things you would recommend parents ensure they the proficiencies you want parents to really focus on, 3 to 5 of them that their students should have to be college and career ready?
Okay, great. So the first one I would say is making sure your children know how to clearly organize their thoughts. Because if you don't know how to organize what you're thinking, that's going to impact you every time you write, as well as if you have to do public speaking, any kind of presentations you have to do. Those all involve the idea of being able to clearly organize my thoughts. So, of course, I teach public speaking, and there's the magic 3 to 5 points, that type of thing. So you don't necessarily have to go to that extent. But whatever you're writing about, depending on the format, you need to be able to say, okay, I'm talking about this subject. What are the main ideas I'm going to be communicating? And then be able to organize it with a clear introduction and then your body paragraphs and your conclusion. Or even if it's simply a discussion post you're going to be doing, you still have to be able to think, okay, what am I being asked? And then how can I organize my thoughts? So the idea of translating what's up here to on paper can be challenging for a lot of people. So that's probably the first essential skill. Secondly, I would say being able to research effectively. Now, somewhat in middle school, probably more in high school, you should be doing research papers where you're going out and you're getting other people's information and bringing it in. So knowing how to find that information, knowing what information to use, knowing how to use it in a correct way so you don't plagiarize, because plagiarism is a big deal in college these days. And so you really have to make sure that you are getting the information and putting it into your own words, but still citing your source. And I've had students who I've required to use on a paper a certain number of sources, and they don't know how to paraphrase. So they put a bunch of collected quotations together. So I even got to the point where I had to limit and say, okay, you can use no more than one quotation of 3 lines per typed page, because otherwise the students would just piece together big clumps of quoted material, which is not really processing the information yourself. So the clear, organized thoughts, knowing how to research, and then the third component would be knowing grammar and spelling. You can have great thoughts, you can have great research. If you can't put it in the correct structure that is required by the English language, you're going to have problems. Now, yes, if the other two are strong, you can rely on Word and some of those things to help you if you're a little weak in the grammar and the spelling aspect. But you have to actually make sure you do it. And that's what I'm finding, that students are not, the tools are there, but they're not really using them. Or they will use Word spelling grammar check, but never read through the document again and make sure that it didn't spell or grammar check it to something it wasn't supposed to be. And quick funny story, I was working on my master's thesis. So this is my big paper at the end of my master's degree. And I had, it was, thankfully it was a draft, but I had used the word assess multiple times, and I must have spelled it wrong once, so it wanted me to check it. So I checked it and I corrected it all throughout the document, but I accidentally did it to asses instead of assess. So my entire document, everywhere I meant to say assess, said asses. And my mentor, who was correcting my thesis, sent it back to me and said, I don't think this is what you mean. And I thought, oh my goodness, that is definitely not what I mean. So you really have to make sure you read through it again, even if you use the tools available, to make sure that it's caught everything, you haven't changed something incorrectly. So those would be my three main ideas.
I love that story because, sometimes younger students, they'll use a tool like a crutch. They want the tool to do the thing for them. And so I love that, you still need to know on your own how to edit, how to proofread, and things of that nature. I love that. It's so funny. My heart is just singing as you were outlining the three proficiencies: organize, research, understanding grammar and spelling, because those are all of the things that I teach with the students that I am working with. And so that's super exciting to hear. So what advice would you give to, I know we talked about the proficiencies. Do you have any advice you give to parents who want to support their children to becoming better writers that might be outside of just proficiencies?
Well, and I think this would apply to speaking as well as writing. But one thing I know that we've done with our kids is we encourage them to use proper grammar when they're speaking as well. We joke that my husband is the grammar Nazi. And so whenever anybody says something that's grammatically incorrect, he corrects them. And I'll do the same thing. And sometimes our kids have gotten really frustrated with us because we correct their grammar so often. But as a result, they are all well spoken, and they have their employers commenting on how well spoken they are. So we've forced them to apply that as they're speaking, but then also when they're writing. And I do a lot of, for my son, I'll double check his work before he submits it. He's to the point now where he's doing pretty well on his own, but I'll go through and I'll edit it and say, okay, this is incorrect, and I'll make him fix things before he submits them. Because I feel like as a homeschooler, a homeschooling parent, which I am, it's my job to also teach my kids. Now, if I don't have proficiency in those areas, so if I'm not good or strong in writing or grammar, well, then I need to seek help. And that help could be someone like you, who's able to fill in the gaps where I'm not able. So being able to help your child from your own knowledge, but then stay on the idea of correcting them so that they become well-spoken and well-written people.
Very nice. So hot topic. So I always ask a hot topic question, particularly when it comes to writing. And AI is a big thing now that everyone is talking about. If you haven't heard about AI, I don't know where you've been under a rock somewhere. So from your perspective, I think I'm really interested in what you have to say, particularly being in this field of teaching for 30 years and seeing AI hit the scene here in the last few years. How do you see technology, specifically AI, impacting the way students write and communicate? And do you think this is a positive or negative development from the perspective of writing?
I was actually thinking about this on my way home today from work. And so I haven't used, the one I'm most familiar with is ChatGPT, and I haven't really used it though. So I have no idea. I have an idea of how it works, but I personally have not used it. Excuse me. And one of the reasons why is because I'm pretty confident in my writing skills on my own. But I've also working on starting my own business, and my coach has said many times, don't use ChatGPT to write for you, because whatever it produces is not going to come across as genuine and authentic. It's not going to come across like you. And I think that's a really valid point when we're talking about how we communicate. There's a difference in how I communicate and how a computer is going to make me communicate. Now, I do think there are some positive aspects to it. So my husband has used it recently in forming some template letters for his work, for example, that need to be more formal, and it saves him a lot of time. So in that kind of situation, I think it can be very helpful. In education, you have to be very careful, because when you write something and you let ChatGPT rewrite it for you, it's no longer your work. And so then we would consider that to be essentially plagiarism. And I've seen this in some of the documents and things that are being put out by the college now, where they're having standards set up with regard to ChatGPT and how you're allowed to use it in a course that would be acceptable, and ways you're allowed to use it that would not be acceptable. And I would say for the majority of what I require in my classes, ChatGPT would not be acceptable. So if you get into the habit of using it and relying on it to write for you, especially when what I'm expecting as a teacher is your own words, then we're talking about an ethical situation where you're presenting a computer's work as your own. And that's unethical, and that would be plagiarism. So that would be the downside. If you use it for things where it doesn't matter necessarily that it's your own work and it helps save time, that's great. But if it's supposed to be your own words, then it's unethical.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. And I think it's great to hear from a college professor on this issue as well, particularly for parents who we don't have kids quite in that age. Well, I do. I have two students who are, well, all of my students are high school or in college. But for parents who have younger children, again, finding that balance of when can it be used as a tool and be useful, and then when is it too much and unethical, particularly from the perspective of a professor. So I think that's helpful to understand, because it's not going away and it's definitely revolutionizing so many industries, and it will be important for young students to know how to leverage it wisely, ethically, and things of that nature. So I appreciate you giving your feedback on that. Did you want to add something else to that?
I think that it can be used even for fun things. So my husband has had it create some visual images that he's sent as memes or GIFs to people. But my son is taking college classes, and his computer teacher will regularly send them emails to try to motivate them to stay working, and he'll use ChatGPT to do it. So one he just did recently was the speech from the movie Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
And he started out the email by saying, well, I was going to have ChatGPT do the entire speech, but it ended up being 4 pages long. So I'll give you a summary. And it was so funny the way that it had edited that speech from Independence Day to apply to a bunch of different things related to computers. So I'm sure in that context, it was very amusing to the students, and probably had more of a motivational effect than him just saying, hey, let's keep working on our computer stuff.
That's a great example. Thank you. Well, I can't let you go without giving us some fun advice. And so, if you could give one quirky, or it doesn't have to be quirky, but one quirky piece of advice to young writers that they wouldn't find in a textbook, what would it be?
I don't know that you wouldn't find this. You would find the idea in a textbook, but maybe not the way I'm phrasing it. And at least from my recent experience, I would say punctuation use
Say that one more time because it just broke up just a little bit. We heard punctuation.
punctuation is your friend. Use it.
Yes, punctuation is your friend. And then it broke up just a little bit one more time. I'm sorry to have you continue to say that.
You use punctuation because that's what I'm seeing a lot of is that texting language where there's no punctuation.
Yes, punctuation is your friend. Use punctuation. So if you're a young listener reading or listening to this or watching this, use punctuation. Even in text messages, try it in text messages. It is your friend. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Cancel, for spending some time with us today. And I know my listeners may want to get in contact with you. So if they're wanting to learn more about your work or they're wanting to connect with you, where can they find you?
My website is thecommunicationdoc.com. And as you read in my bio, my focus right now is I'm shifting from teaching college to starting my own business where I'm going to be doing training courses for married couples to teach them how to communicate effectively. And communication is so important in every area of our life, but especially in our relationships. And so anybody who goes to my website, there's a free masterclass there that they can download called 4 Thoughts That Will Destroy Your Marriage and How to Overcome Them. And so you can access that free masterclass and see how my training works and get some beneficial information that will hopefully help you if you're having struggles in your marriage, or even if you aren't, because these thoughts are actually things that all of us struggle with if we're married. So the video or the masterclass can help you to correct some of those thoughts and add some positive value to your marriage.
Very good. Well, I'll make sure I include your website in the show notes. Can we find you on Instagram or Facebook or socials? Is there a place to find you there as well?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, all of them at the Communication Docs. If you type that in, you should find them.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and helping us to hear from your perspective why writing matters and things that we can do as parents to make sure that our students are excellent communicators and that they're college and career ready. So have a wonderful day and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. You too.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I specifically love the 3 proficiencies that Dr. Cancel outlined for us as parents, making sure our students know how to organize their thoughts before they write. Number 2, making sure our students build the proficiency of researching effectively. And number 3, ensuring that our students have a very solid concept and grasp of grammar and spelling so that they are college and career ready. And one thing that I felt during this conversation was just excited because those are exactly the proficiencies that I build for my students in my online writing classes. So if you need any extra support as a parent to make sure that these proficiencies are being covered and your child is college and career ready, come find me at writewithmrsbrown.com. I'll see you in the next episode.